Hello everyone, and thank you for watching the webinar today. We're delighted to have partnered with Customs Connect to deliver this section on contract and legalities around Brexit and the end of the transition period. My name is Terry Moore. I'm a senior associate in the corporate commercial team here at Meyerson Solicitors. In this webinar, as I say, I'll be considering some of the issues surrounding contracts, other legal issues which businesses need to be thinking about, which will be prevalent as at the end of the transition period, as at 31st of December 2020. I should also mention that if you do have any questions, please do feel free to submit these, and the email address to submit those questions to is info@customs-connect.co.uk. We will try and answer all of those questions and come back to you in due course. So just to give a little bit of context, a bit of a recap on the key events to date, just to demonstrate how we got to where we are and why the transition period is important. On the 23rd of June 2016, obviously the now infamous referendum was held and the public voted to leave the European Union. 29th of March 2017, Article 50 was invoked, and that started the formal process for the UK's withdrawal. And then earlier this year, after Boris Johnson's election victory, he was able to secure the majority needed to pass his withdrawal agreement after a few tries of doing so. The withdrawal agreement took effect and the UK formally left the European Union on 31st of January this year. The following day marked the beginning of the transition period, which was a business as usual sort of period beginning on 1st of February for 11 months, during which period free movement of people and free trade and the other key components of European Union membership remained in place. That transition period is due to come to an end on the 31st of December 2020, and this webinar is, we're aiming to give a little bit of consideration as to what the legal implications of that may be. So deal or no deal, at the time of recording this webinar, there is no deal signed, although commentators do suggest that the legal text is close to being finalised, with some key issues remaining. Those issues do seem to be getting more narrow, and commentators are hopeful that a deal will be reached, although we still don't know what that deal will look like. There is a rush against the clock to ensure that the deal is finalised by the 1st of January 2021. There's only approximately 5 weeks to go from the date of this recording, and it looks as though there is still quite a bit of content to get through to finalise the deal. We will be reporting on any further impacts ourselves as and when a deal is announced, as will Customs Connect. So please do visit our Brexit hub, which is at meyerson.co.uk/Brexit, and also customsconnect.co.uk. So what is the legal impact and what do businesses need to be aware of at the end of the transition period? The good news is that the main body of EU law will remain in force, but there are some notable exceptions to that, and some areas will be overhauled. There are different impacts depending on what type of activity a business carries on. I would envisage that a lot of the businesses watching this webinar will import and export goods and services, and that will be something I'll be exploring in a bit more detail. But also you may rely on EU nationals for your workforce, and you need to be aware of the new immigration rules and make sure that your workforce has obtained settled status to remain able to work in the country at the end of the transition period. There are issues around transferring personal data overseas if you are a business which carries on that type of processing activity. And also you need to think carefully about your relationships with suppliers and customers who you may have in EU countries. So touching on supply contracts, it's widely anticipated that there are going to be border delays and supply chain problems arising at the end of the transition period. Border checks will come into place, and safety and standard controls is another area which is going to become more stringent. It's anticipated that there will be a smoother transition for importing goods as opposed to exporting goods. The UK government has said that it's going to phase in its own checks at the border over the course of 2021. Whereas with regards to exports, the European Union has not really reciprocated on this. The EU has stated that those border checks will come into force from 1st of January 2021, which does mean that in particular exporters need to be really vigilant here, need to make sure that you have everything in place to ensure that you're not going to be subject to significant delays in delivering those products. In terms of recommended action here, what I would suggest is that you carry out an analysis, a risk analysis of your supply chain, discuss any issues with your customers and suppliers, and if necessary, put into place a contingency plan. We can help with that, as can Customs Connect, so please do get in touch. Additionally, I would recommend to carry out a bit of an audit of any existing contracts. Irrespective of where you sit in the supply chain, you may have certain obligations, and you need to be aware as to who will be responsible if, for example, there are delays at the border. What are the repercussions? What financial impact might that have on your customers or their customers? And do those liabilities get passed along the supply chain, and where does your business sit in that? Product compliance is another area which is going to change, and you need to be vigilant here. There are issues which can arise, and you may have some contracts in place which pursuant to which you give contractual assurances. This can give rise to liability issues, so it is worth just checking to make sure you are happy that you will be able to adhere to those compliance points. And then SLAs and KPIs, service level agreements and key performance indicators, essentially terminology for assurances which you give to your customers. So if you give contractual promises for lead times, milestones, and other performance metrics, could it be the case that Brexit impacts on that? Could it make those lead times unattainable? And what is the impact of those? As well as reviewing existing contracts, you need to be careful to ensure that any new contracts you enter into are carefully drafted in light of the challenges which the end of the transition period poses. I would recommend to review your standard supply terms, for example. If you have any standard purchasing terms, review those also. And any bespoke contracts, just make sure that they are carefully drafted. Again, service levels is going to be a crucial point here. You need to mitigate the uncertainty which will come with the end of the transition period, and allow a buffer for the inevitable delays and issues at the borders. Fixed price regimes, I would suggest to be more vigilant. There are a number of issues, economic issues at the minute, not just due to Brexit, but also due to COVID-19. 2021 will be a year with some economic uncertainty. Hopefully, we get through that relatively unscathed, but nonetheless, you need to be careful about fixing prices for too long a period. Currency fluctuations may render that difficult to live up to those promises. And additionally, there may be duties and tariff increases if there is no deal at the end of the transition period. So at the very least, you need to be making sure that your contracts allow you to review your prices for economic factors beyond your control, if there is not the commercial desire to be able to have variable pricing on a long-term basis. Disputes is another area which is a little tricky at the minute, because this is contingent on whether or not there is a deal, and if there is a deal, whether or not disputes is even dealt with as part of that. This is an area which, during the transition period, and whilst the UK was a member of the European Union, was relatively straightforward. Different member states recognised each other's judgments, and enforcing against European entities was something which was quite simple to do. At the end of the transition period, if there is no deal in place and the deal does not address disputes, then enforcement will become more difficult in the post-Brexit landscape. It may be that there are certain ways to mitigate this, for example, exploring different forms of dispute resolution. It may be that arbitration is a better solution. This depends on the type of business you carry out and what the exposure to risk is. So we would recommend taking legal advice on that. And then finally, Brexit clauses. This is a bit of a catch-all, really. There's no agreed legal definition of a Brexit clause, but essentially it's a clause which envisages that Brexit may significantly impact on the commercial relationship between you and your collaborators in Europe. You need to think about what impact it may have, and if the impact is significant and has a fundamental shift in the original commercial intentions of the parties, do you need a right to either terminate the contract, suspend performance of your duties under it, or maybe alter the prices or payment terms, for example? Another area which I would suggest to give some detailed consideration to is data protection. Now, you need to make sure that you are compliant if you wish to continue to transfer or receive personal data between your business in the UK and European Union countries. Some common examples of where this occurs: you may host personal data with your hosting providers whose servers are based in the European Union. It may be that you have European group companies which you share employee or customer data with, or you may have other EU collaborators such as suppliers or customers, and it may be the case that they access certain of your business's personal data. Now, at the end of the transition period, the UK is set to become a third country unless there is an adequacy decision. What this means is that the European Union needs to take a positive action to recognise the UK as being essentially a safe harbour. And if there is no adequacy decision, then the free flow of data will no longer be possible. The good news is that GDPR does include certain exemptions and exceptions to this rule. They're known as derogations under the GDPR. And what those derogations say is that you can still transfer data between European Union countries and third countries if you have the consent of the data subjects, or if there are other appropriate safeguards in place, such as standard contractual clauses or binding corporate rules in respect of group companies. Those derogations, they do have a number of caveats. It is a complex area, and it's just one of those areas which I would recommend to carry out a proper review of and do take legal advice. I've touched on a few of the key areas, but there are a number of other areas which will inevitably be impacted here. As mentioned, if you rely on EU nationals for your workforce, you need to be mindful that there are various deadlines coming up for them to obtain settled status. There will be new immigration rules, which is a points-based system coming into force at the end of the transition period. And so it's important to be familiar with those and to make sure that your workforce is not going to be unduly disrupted. Also, intellectual property. With regards to trademarks, the position is that these should be reciprocated in the UK, any European Union registrations you have. However, if you do have any pending applications in the European Union, different rules do apply. So please do get in touch, and we can help point you in the right direction for this. So thanks again for listening, and thanks to Customs Connect for hosting this webinar. My contact email is terry.moore@myison.co.uk if you want to get in touch with me in respect of any of the issues arising out of this webinar. And as mentioned, please do submit any queries to info@customsconnect.co.uk, and we will do our best to come back to you with some answers to those questions. Thanks very much.